Hey, this is Mad Movie Mark of the Mad Movie Mark Movie Review. Thank you for joining me as I review the 1964 Cuban Russian propaganda movie, I Am Cuba. Hey, great, thanks. That's the best applause I've ever received. It's very elaborate. Thank you so much. I'm reviewing every movie that has 100% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm giving them all a score of 1 to 10. After I watch them and score them all, I will rank them from worst to best. I started in the 1920 silent movie era, and now I'm at 1964 with I Am Cuba. This movie has a 100% fresh rating from the critics and a 92% fresh rating from the audience. It was directed by Mikhail Kalatozov and is one of many foreign language films that I'm running into in the 1960s, which is great. I love them. So I know I talk a lot about cinematography and camera work in movies, and this movie probably has the greatest camera work / cinematography I've ever seen. This is witnessed in throughout the whole movie, but there's definitely two sections in the movie which the cinematography is absolutely astounding. The first one I just showed you in my opening, where there's this camera that starts at like the top of this apartment complex building and is like lifted all the way down to the bottom. I'm assuming, I think I read that they just took the camera, it was like a handheld camera, and they just kept passing it to different people, and they just kept passing it down the line, but it came out absolutely incredible. There's another scene later on in the movie, which I actually don't know how they did, I have an idea, but that is actually just as spectacular. So this movie essentially is split up into 4 separate parts, 4 separate stories, and each story is basically about how the plight of the Cuban and how their life is difficult and terrible. Essentially, that's what it appears to be. Sure. So in the first story, we meet this woman and this man, and they are in love, and they're talking about getting married. The gentleman is a fruit salesman, and the woman, at first, we don't know what she does, but she's having a hard time kind of kissing her boyfriend, kind of being intimate with her boyfriend. He even brings up the fact that, hey, like, you've never kissed anyone, have you? Because he tries to kiss her, and it doesn't work. It doesn't happen.
Mira, en esta iglesia nos casaremos y tendrás un vestido blanco.
Un vestido blanco.
Then we are shown a nightclub setting where there's 3 gentlemen who I believe are American because they're dubbed in English. Clearly, it is dubbed in English because the dubbing is pretty bad, but there's only 2 parts in this movie where the actors actually are speaking English or is dubbed in English, and the second time it is clearly Americans because they are in like the military. But at this point, I can't tell if they're actually American or if it's just dubbed in American and English for no reason. I don't know, but the acting here is very bad, very poor. The dubbing is very poor. The acting is very poor. But it's basically 3 Americans who are in this nightclub who are trying to pick up prostitutes in Cuba. Now, 2 of them are on board with the idea of picking up a prostitute, but the third one is not. He basically says he's not interested in picking up the prostitute, like he doesn't go in for that sort of thing. So the 2 gentlemen who are interested in the prostitutes, they're seen talking to them, asking them how much English they know, and all of this, and then eventually...
I'll take that tasty morsel.
And I'll take that dish.
The girlfriend of the couple I mentioned earlier, she is shown and she is also a prostitute. Now, her boyfriend doesn't know that, and the audience didn't know that until right now. The third gentleman who didn't want to pick up a prostitute, he has decided that he likes her and that he's going to be with her and he's going to attempt to take her home. Now, when he takes her home, he just says, "Hey, I'm interested to see how you people live."
I'd like to see how these women live.
Sure, sure.
I find it very interesting. Comprende? Interessante. Interessante.
Interessante.
Please take me to your house. And she does it. They end up sleeping together, and then her boyfriend walks in, and that's the end of the first. That's the end of the first story. Now, basically, I guess what this is showing is that the women of Cuba can be very poor. They lead a life that they don't necessarily enjoy. There's definitely points during this first story where you see that she wants to get out of this, that this isn't something that she wants to be doing, that she's not comfortable with this, that she is kind of repulsed by this man. Even when he says, like, "Hey, I'm kind of interested in how you guys live," she's very taken aback by this. And even though she clearly doesn't like this guy and she's clearly disgusted by him, she still takes him home because that's basically what she does and what she's expected to do. But you definitely see a point in her where maybe she wants to do better, she wants to get out, she wants to have a better life for herself, but she just doesn't know how, or she just isn't capable. She doesn't have the capabilities to do that because she was born in this poor country and she was born in poverty, and she was just born in this situation that she can't climb out of. So that's the first story. The second story felt like the shortest story to me, but it was my favorite story, maybe because it was the shortest, I don't know, but it's my favorite story, and it involves a sugarcane farmer. He has his house and his business on this piece of land that he doesn't own. The person who owns the land comes up to him one day and says, "I've sold all the land, so you're going to have to get off." And the guy says, "What about my house? What about my sugarcane?" And the guy says, "Well, none of that belongs to you. It all belongs to me because I own the land, so you're going to have to leave."
Las sembraste tierra, casa,
So this gentleman then tells his children that everything's fine, get back to work, don't worry about it. Hey, why don't you guys go into town later and you can play some music on the jukebox, which is something that all the kids love to do. So he sends the kids away, and then when the kids are away, he lights the entire field on fire, and he lights his house on fire. And then he just collapses in the middle of the field. And I don't know if he just falls asleep or he inhales too much smoke or something, but he just collapses in the middle of the field. And then that is the end of the second story. So again, you see the plight of the regular Cuban. You see that, again, born into poverty, not able to get out of it, not owning the things that are yours, not owning the land that you live on, being under the whims of someone else who gets to decide your life for you by just selling the land. He wanted a better life for himself. He had a profitable sugarcane business where he was making a lot of money. He even says, "Hey, they don't know what a gold mine they're sitting on here. I don't know why he sold the land. They're sitting on a gold mine here." But again, the plight of the Cuban and, why life can be miserable when you're under this type of rule. The third story is, I think, the longest story, and definitely the story that has the most backstory to it. It's the story that they seems like they dedicated the most time to actually telling a full story here. So it begins with a student who is told that it begins with a student who runs into this female who's being harassed by a group of American people in the military. I think they're in the Navy. So he ends up pretending like he's with her. The guys back off of her.
Around the world we've traveled far and wide. Around the whole damn cockeyed world.
And then he like eventually learns, he is told by this newspaper clipping that Fidel Castro has been killed. Now, when I saw this, I was like, wait a minute, this isn't right, because I know who Fidel Castro is. He was alive during my time, and I wasn't alive in 1964. So clearly this is wrong. I think he died in like 2016. He was like 90 years old. So clearly did not die in 1964. And when he tells his friends this, they even say, no, it's a lie. They're lying to the people. He didn't actually die. We need to let everyone know that Fidel Castro is still alive and that his regime is still has us by the throat, basically. So they try to pass out pamphlets, and as they're passing out pamphlets to let people know that Fidel Castro is still alive, one of them is murdered by the cops. They then decide to go on this bit of a march slash protest. And honestly, as great as the camera work is in this movie, this is my favorite. This story is like my second least favorite story, even though it's very fleshed out. But it is definitely my favorite as far as camera work goes. There's the scene where they're protesting, the cops start shooting them with fire hoses. I thought was absolutely amazing. Oh, there is also, I'm sorry, I left out a part where the leader, the guy who helped out that female from, save the female from the Navy jerks, he ends up deciding that he's going to go on his own and try to assassinate the chief of police. He gets on this very tall building. Awesome camera work. He has this sniper rifle between like these concrete pieces. He has like a hole in the concrete where he has a sniper rifle, and he has it right on this guy, but he can't shoot him because the guy's kids are there, and he starts to feel guilty. So he ends up not doing that. Anyway, he is part of the leader of this march, of this protest, and he ends up having a fate that you would assume what would happen if you're unarmed and you're trying to rise up against a country that just won't allow that. So I won't give away what happens to him, but you can basically assume what happens to him is not great. And then the fourth story is actually my least favorite story, in all honesty. It follows a guy who, he seems like he is someone who is he's being chased by the law, or he's being chased by someone. He finds this family who it seems like they're kind of in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of this desert with a bunch of mountains around them. He ends up eating with them, and he asks to borrow their gun. The husband says, sure, you can borrow my gun because I can't fire it. I'm not someone who likes violence, so here, take my gun. The guy takes the gun, he walks away, and then this gentleman who lives in these mountains, his house starts getting bombed, just bombed to heck. I don't know why, I'm not sure. Maybe they're after that guy, I don't know. But his house starts getting bombed. His son ends up dying, and then he ends up joining the rebellion effort. He ends up getting his own gun, and he ends up joining the effort to try to avenge his family. Really not a fan of any time when a child dies, and especially I didn't think it was really necessary here. I mean, something else could have happened where he could have decided he was going to rise up. I just wasn't. I wasn't about it, basically. and that's the fourth. And so you see like all these stories. Someone is being persecuted. Someone who lives in Cuba is just leading a life that they want to better themselves. They're trying to like rise up against the poverty. They're trying to rise up against the law enforcement that tries to bring them down. They're just trying to rise up against something. Everyone basically in this movie is trying to better themselves, but none of them end up getting there really. Maybe the last guy did. They don't really like finish his story, but you know they only get to a certain point, and then it ends up crashing down. Basically, just saying that it's almost impossible to like. If you're born in this situation, it's really hard to get out of it, basically. So like I said, and the next the part in the third story, there's a part where there's a funeral procession, and this camera like is going across buildings, and it's like ducking like under the building. It's very crazy. It's like high up in the sky, and then it kind of like ducks down to like a smaller level. I mean, obviously they probably use cranes for this shot, but wow, like, absolutely crazy. Probably it's even better than the opening scene that I showed. It's a marvel. I can't believe the cinematography for this movie is absolutely astounding. I was just blown away by how great this camera work is. And the camera work is like chaotic when things are going chaotic. Like in the nightclub scene, there's a point where the girl who is dating the guy, she ends up like kind of going nuts because of how she's being treated, and she doesn't want to be in the situation. And the camera's going nuts, and the camera's going crazy. And when the fourth one where they're being bombed, the camera's like bouncing up and down. It's like it's mimicking what's going on during that specific set. That being said, the camera work was great, and it really put you in the action. It really made you feel like you were part of this movie and that you were feeling what these characters were feeling. Absolutely phenomenal. The rest of the movie, however, I'm not a huge fan of. The acting in the first story was absolutely horrendous, and the dubbing was also absolutely horrendous. And if you can get that kind of camera work and that kind of like the best camera work in the world, why can't you dub over a movie? Like, why can't you get the acting? Why can't you do better? I don't know. It was really bad. And the second one, which is my favorite, it wasn't long enough for me. Like, and I think that's one of the issues with these is that they're like 35, 40 minutes long. And there's a couple of them where I wanted them to just not even exist. Maybe like the fourth one, just take it out and make the second and first one longer. But to end it where this guy is just in a field, and after every like act, after every new scene, there's this woman who dubs over who says like "I am Cuba," and then she like says these like words of wisdom after "I am Cuba." Just like show me something more from the second one. I want to know like what happened to the kids. Obviously, the kids are if he like died from smoke inhalation, the kids are on their own now, which is like could be a whole separate part of this movie where you just show the kids on their own at the plight of the children who lose their father. And even, I mean, I don't know. I wish the second one was longer. It left me wanting more. The first one, when the boyfriend comes in and finds his girlfriend has slept with this guy, it just ends there. It's like, well, what's going on? What happened the rest of her story? They're just stories that aren't fleshed out. They're stories that don't like end, except for the third one. They're just stories that just stop. And I wasn't a fan of that at all. I wanted to see more of it. I wanted to see a resolution to all these stories, more of a resolution than what I got. That being said, the acting and the rest of them aren't that great either. Really, for me, the best part of this movie is the cinematography and the camera work. That's like what keeps you in the movie. That's what keeps you interested, and that's what keeps you going. A 2.5 hour movie where you really have to like all 4 stories if you're going to like this movie, and you really have to be invested in all 4 stories, and you have to be invested in characters where you don't really get a lot of background on them, and you don't really get a lot of who they are. You're shown a snippet of their life for 30 minutes, and you either really care about it or you really don't. And if you don't care about it, then, well, hopefully you'll like the next one. You know, that's kind of how it is. And I thought it ended on a very sour note. For the second and even the third to be okay, for that last one to just, I thought was the worst of the 4. It just left me kind of with a sour taste in my mouth. But I'm going to give it 7.5, and that's mostly for the camera work and the cinematography being just so amazing. Thank you. I hope you'll join me next time when I review Woman in the Dunes. Have a great day.